Hello, good morning, and welcome everyone, anyone who may be here, and any of you who are watching the recording. My name is Susan Derby, and I am a certified hand-in-hand instructor, and I live in Los Angeles. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for taking out time from your busy day today to join me on this Facebook Live session. Facebook Lives are one of the ways that Hand in Hand likes to support the work that you're doing in your families. So I hope that you will get some new ideas from our short time together today. So just so you know, we will probably run about 15 minutes today, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And because our time is brief, I ask that you put specific questions that you have in the Parent Club discussion forum. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Parent Club a little later if you don't know what that is. However, if you do have general questions, we may be able to point you to some articles and resources in the chat box. And welcome to anyone who's just joined. Again, my name's Susan Derby, and I'm an instructor of hand-in-hand parenting. And, to start things off today, I'm going to talk just a little bit about hand in hand, and then I'll spend some time on the topic of helping our children with fear, which is the main theme for today's live. Hello, everyone. I'm seeing some hellos in the chat box. I'm so glad you could join me today. So Hand in Hand is a nonprofit organization that brings parents good information, tools, and lots of support for the vital work of parenting. And there are four main ideas to the hand-in-hand approach for those of you who might not be so familiar with it. One is that we as parents need and deserve support for the emotional challenge of parenting. And when we build that support for ourselves, we're better able to meet our own needs as well as the needs of our children. Number two is that our children are born to feel connected to us. This sense of connection is what they need in order to learn, to build resilience, to build friendships and confidence as they grow. And number three, when children don't feel connected to us, their behavior goes off track, and they are actually able to signal to us for help. And four, when we foster laughter and play, and that's laughter without tickling, and when we set limits without harshness, and when we support our children to have good hearty cries and tantrums, it helps our children feel more connected to us. And they move closer to healing. So give me 1 second, and welcome to everybody who's joined us. And I am new. I'm going to give you that caveat. I'm new to Facebook Lives, to the Facebook Live land. And so apologies in advance for any technical hiccups, but hopefully we'll be straightforward. And as I mentioned to at the very beginning, I'm not going to be able to answer specific questions during this video today. This is more like a mini presentation on the talk of helping children with their fears. So if you have specific questions that you want answered, try to go over to the Parent Club discussion group a little bit later, and I'll talk a little bit more about the Parent Club toward the end of this call. If you have general questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in the box, and we may be able to point you to some articles and resources. And so I am going to continue on and touch on this theme of fear and helping kids with their fear. That is one. I'm the mother of two daughters. I have a 4-year-old and an 11-year-old. And just to give you the quick little background, I first discovered Hand in Hand when my older daughter was 3, and I just had no idea what to do about the big feelings and tantrums and off-track behavior. And Hand in Hand came into my life, and the connections in my family just transformed. And most importantly, I got the support that I needed to be able to strengthen my connections with my daughter. And one way that this approach has helped me tremendously is in understanding more about children's fears. And, both of my daughters have experienced fears, of course. We all do. And sometimes those fears are, they're more long-term and persistent, and other times they're shorter term, and sometimes we don't really know when we're in it. So instead of shrugging off those fears and hoping that they'll go away, that they'll grow out of them with age, whatever, I actually feel more empowered to proactively address my children's fears thanks to Hand in Hand and this approach. My aim is really to help my kids not let their fears hold them back, and to be able to live in a place of joy and confidence, which I believe is their innate nature. And fears can show up in many different ways. Sometimes we know where they've come from, and sometimes we don't. For instance, I have a friend whose daughter is afraid of dogs. And as far as I can recall, I don't believe they know what the origin of that fear is. She's never been bitten by a dog. However, I was bitten by a dog when I was a young child, and I was, thereon after fearful of dogs for my whole childhood and adolescence. I know where that fear came from. It was very clear. And really, it doesn't matter so much whether, generally it doesn't matter. Usually, you don't need to know the origin in order to help your child with their fears or their current manifestation of the fears, if that makes sense. There's a lot to say on this topic, but today I'm just going to touch briefly on two ideas that I focus on when thinking about my kids let go of fear in the present. One is that I want to support rather than stop their tears. And I want to see the tears that they shed as a way that they are letting go of something and moving closer to healing. And two, I want to connect with them through laughter. Laughter is one of the building blocks of connection. And it's also a way to make us as parents feel emotionally safer to our kids, so that they will then show us what their real feelings are. So just to give you, those are two kind of general ideas. I want to give you a little bit of an idea of how this has worked in my household just this very week. And I'm going to talk about a timely theme, Halloween. 'Tis the season for many of us. But the idea of fears has been very present for my younger child. She unfortunately is fearful of many of the representations of Halloween out there. And she has an 11-year-old sister, as I mentioned, and older sister loves Halloween. She loves the scary stuff. And so my 4-year-old has had probably earlier exposure than is ideal. And so this fear of Halloween, or some of the things associated with Halloween, it might be connected to earlier times and, to what, I'm not sure, but it could be connected to older fears, or it could be something that's, a little bit more current, I'm not sure. But what I want to think about is, how do I support her now through this? First, I can try to limit what she sees or hears. And, part of that includes communications with her older sister too, to be a little bit more careful about what she's talking about and showing to her younger sister. But can I stop Halloween from happening? I wish I could. No, I can't. We live in a city also, and Halloween is everywhere. And also, my younger daughter, she's interested in some aspects of the holiday. She's interested in the festivity and the fun and the celebration and the candy, of course. And so I'm not really looking to censor everything completely. That's not my goal. So what I want to do is help her with her fears, the fear aspect. And so to support her with this, I've been listening to her feelings and I've been encouraging laughter. And both of those are ways for her to release some tension around it. So the other day, my older daughter wanted to go to a Halloween store after school. Both my girls were with me. And so I checked in with my 4-year-old and made sure that it was okay for her. And she said, okay, she would try. So I picked a place that wasn't one of the scarier places. It's a local store that I knew didn't have those like 3D scary animated huge creatures. And, I felt like it would be a little bit more tame. But unfortunately, we get there to the front of the store and there's this ghoulish figure in the window. And my daughter saw it immediately and she grabbed my leg and just started crying and said she didn't want to go in. And so I crouched down to her level, making sure to meet her eyes. And I didn't say much, but I just let her have her cry, and letting her know that I was there, holding her and, saying, I'm sorry, it's scary. We don't have to go in. But I didn't pull her in, of course, and I didn't pull her away either. I just sat with her and let her have her feelings. And thankfully, my older daughter was very patient in this process. And, after a couple minutes, she was done with her cry and we left. And that was that. Now it's something that I might actually bring up again this weekend. I might mention, hey, are you ready? Are you interested at all in going to that Halloween store? And I'll just feel it out. I'm not going to pressure her. I certainly am not attached to her needing to go into the Halloween store. But by mentioning it to her, it gives her a chance to kind of decide what she needs from that experience. My mention of it might bring up more feelings. And again, I'm looking at tears as helping her offload some of the tension and release some of her fear. And if I'm there to help her support that process, then, it becomes a positive thing and may bring her closer to releasing that fear. But I'm not going to push it. The point is really that I want to support her with her hard feelings. And now the laughter part. So I have another little anecdote, and that is that the morning after the Halloween store, my 4-year-old initiated a game with me, and she initiated it. She suggested that we play this game where I would be a zombie and chase after her. And so I found that interesting that this came up the day after the Halloween store. So what I did is I slowly just like bumbled after her, arms up in front of me. And I was a goofy zombie. I made sure to not be a scary zombie. And, I kind of chased her around the room and she always got away from me. But what I noticed is that when my hand, came toward her and slightly brushed her arm, or maybe just touched it very lightly, she would start laughing. And I had the sense that there was a fine balance there, that if I grabbed her arm, that would make her scared. So I didn't do that. And so just slowly, like slightly brushed her arm or even barely touched it. And she laughed whenever I did that. And so I wanted to encourage that. I wanted to remember laughter is this connection builder and also a way for our kids to release some of their fears. And so I kept the laughter going. And, but I kept her in charge of the play too. And so the play changed, a few times as we went on after we had some good laughs, and then she changed the play. And then I eventually ended up in jail for a while, I think. Yeah, it's in jail for a while toward the front door. So on another note, I just wanted to mention that sometimes we don't know where one fear ends and another one begins. It's not always so clear cut and categorized. Feelings and fears can get tangled up with each other. And just yesterday, my daughter's preschool, so this is all happening and appeared this past few days. So just yesterday, my daughter mentioned to me after school when I picked her up that she had spent some time crying that morning about a sudden earthquake drill. And it scared her. And so she spent a lot of time in her teacher's lap crying about that. And then while she was in the midst of her feelings, she started crying about a shot that she was going to have later that day, which was yesterday. And so her teacher listened to her feelings about that. And then after that, after her tears were all done, she started telling this teacher and some of the other kids about her Halloween fears. And so this was all kind of bundled up together. And I don't know where one fear ended and where the other one began, but and then she ended up having a really great day, I guess, after all of this. But she utilized her teacher's support and presence. And I'm so grateful that she goes to a school where she's able to have her feelings and be heard, but she was able to utilize her attention, the teacher's attention, and release some of her own inner tension about all kinds of fears that were coming up for her. So just to wrap up, I'm not exactly sure what we're doing on time. Okay, so I'm running a little over what I thought I would, but I did want to wrap up soon and just let you know, for this kind of series of anecdotes that I've told you about Halloween, I don't really have a happily ever after ending for them. Halloween isn't here yet, so we'll see how it all shakes out. But and I also want to let you know that I'm not attached, again, to having any particular outcome regards to Halloween itself. I actually think it's quite reasonable for her to not want to embrace the holiday completely. There are some scarier aspects, and I have a lot of questions about how appropriate these are for kids. But so I think she's reasonable and maybe even smart to resist some of it. But my aim is to help her to have more of a choice, to not be held back by fears, and to access that inner confidence and that inner joy, so that she can choose to join in on any of the fun that interests her in an uninhibited way. If you would like to learn more about supporting children with their fears, I highly recommend the book Listen by Patty Wiffler and Tasha Shore. And if you have any specific questions, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to keep track of the discussion board, but I've appreciated seeing the welcomes that have come up. And I know that also the staff at Hand in Hand have been able to point out some resources along the way, which I hope have been helpful. If you have any specific questions beyond those, please utilize some of our resources. The Parent Club discussion board on Facebook is an excellent place to post questions and get answered by certified instructors and by other members. If you are not familiar with the Parent Club, please check out the website and do a little search for that. I believe there is a special going on right now, and that's a great place to equip yourself with some ongoing support. And Hand in Hand has many other resources for all of you as well. Classes and support groups, both online and through local instructors all over the world. There are intensive trainings for professionals, opportunities to book one-on-one consultations, and the starter class, a 6-week weekly class, which is available online at different times and in person through local instructors. That is a wonderful, wonderful way to gain a foundation in this approach. It saved my life and my sanity once upon a time. And so if you go to the website, you'll see a calendar of upcoming starter classes there. There are also a number of self-guided classes on the website on various topics, including helping children with aggression, sleeping, setting limits, building a listening partnership. They're great. These are great classes. They're low cost, and you can access them at times that work for you. And as a nonprofit, Hand in Hand relies on donations to make our resources freely available for parents, including Facebook Lives like this one. There's also the articles on the website, online discussion groups, podcasts. The list is really endless. So if you're planning any end-of-year donations, we would be very, very grateful if you would consider us in that. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining me today and for taking out the time to think about ways that you can support and further strengthen your relationships with your kids. And happy Halloween to you, however that may look for you and your family. And goodbye for now. Thanks again.